My name is Isela Aguirre. Um, and lately, I have been composing illustrations that are like abstract entities. And I'm kind of fascinated with combining layers of imagery so that they exist together in a flat plane. Before this, like last year, or the series before this, I was more working on illustrations that were more narrative and they were like personal about something that was happening in my life. But like this one is a gel transfer of observational drawing from my journal. And then on top of that, I did some other like life drawing studies on top of that. And one of them is from like a pterodactyl or something fossil from the Museum of Natural Science. Um, this is still kind of in that same vein. It's like observational things from the museum. And then I layered it on tracing paper. And then underneath is like an acrylic watercolor painting and some collaging of also like observational drawings. So I really draw a lot from observation, and then I combine it together by using gel transfers or drawing on top and just kind of layering, and then it just creates this other kind of entity thing. Um, this one has a funny story. It's called Forced Collaboration. I very much admire my husband, David Waddell. He's a very talented and unbridled painter. And sometimes I really have to like plan things, and I see him and he's just like out, just kind of will throw stuff and paint and collage and do things. And so he said, you know, we need to collaborate. We need to do something together. And I said, okay, I can collaborate with you. So he uses a lot of collage elements, and one day he like threw this stack of cutouts on a table, and they were just like that, and I was like, oh wow, that is so cool. But then I like taped them together and kept them exactly that same way, but then I like stuck it on top of a drawing and this silk screen and this wallpaper piece that I was putting together. And so I was so proud and happy, and I was like, it's a collaboration. And he's like, that's not a collaboration. You just got my stuff and you stuck it on your stuff. And I'm like, but it made this new thing and it's so great. So it's a fun, failed to tape attempt at collaborating with David. So anyhow, this one has a long title, but it's like, you know, rib cage and bones. The bottom is like throat and neck muscles. And I did this drawing. It was the end of the school year. I'm an art teacher, and I was extremely stressed out. I was just exhausted. My muscles were all tight, and I just really wanted to do this drawing with all these things happening. And I did almost feel like my head was going to implode, and it was just the end of the year. And so I kind of really whipped up I made this drawing kind of quickly, and that's more in the style, in the vein of like the drawings that I usually make, because they're more traditional. It's graphite, watercolor, and I just kind of draw as I go and layer it together. But it's still creating this made up like entity thing. Oh, I'm talking too long. This one is more of a study because I'm trying to figure out how to use gel transfers. This one is called Tesoros, which means treasures, and the little person in the center is my daughter, and yes, she's a treasure to me. So I have gel transfers of like little treasures, and also another forced collaboration because that's something David made with the book and the black blobbish stuff. That one's also just kind of a study because I'm trying to figure out how to do gel transfers. This one's called Synthesize, and I'm just kind of assembling things together and trying to break out from doing things more traditionally all of the time. And this one is also gel transfers, and it's called Flag of Sorts. So I'm really trying to explore that avenue a bit more. And then this last one is called Modern Relic, and it's also a gel transfer. Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody. My name is Clay Zaplak. This is Daniela Antello. We've been collaborating for about a year now. We met at the University of Houston. I got my undergraduate work there, and she did her master's in fine arts. Talk a little bit about my work first. So my underlining philosophical principle is there's been traditionally in history this distinction between the natural and the man-made. I kind of refute that idea and say that man-made is part of the natural. So with this series of work I've been working with, I've been trying to find a site and then a material and then seeing how they kind of work together to create these objects. So you see here you have this pond where you have these buoys that are kind of reflecting this slow movement of the pond in their action. So that's kind of the work I've been doing recently. You have another one here using what's considered to be a man-made kind of unnatural environment and refuting that and continuing that kind of process.
And as Clay said, I got my master's degree last year from the University of Houston. And ever since then, I've been really thinking about site-specific dance and movement performances, particularly on video and how that looks on film. This is a piece that's actually going to be playing next week at the French Festival, where I created a choreography and then I put it in different sites of Houston, and it's playing in a grid. And I was interested in how the movement changes with the site and how the site changes once there's a body in the space. Another thing that characterizes my work is I like to mess with people. I like people to participate in my work because they have to. So this is me at the tunnels in downtown Houston, and I put a salsa music, and I am asking people to dance with me salsa because I'm tired of dancing by myself at home. And I got about 10 participants, but I got 700 that said no, but I'm used to failure. It's a good thing. I'm showing this piece because this was the beginning of my performance work on video. I did this for my thesis last year at the University of Houston. There's butcher paper, and I'm chewing through it. I'm spitting it back on the wall. So this interest in space, in sight, and how it looks on film.
So you can see our work is a little bit different, but we had this common interest in performance, this idea that performance is somewhere between being a gesture and the thing in itself, and playing kind of with that idea. So when we first started collaborating, we would go out to these abandoned sites in Houston and repurpose them by performing an action or doing something that's not actually associated with that area. So we found this, for instance, here, we found this abandoned gas station, and we brought a bunch of beach, towels and things like that, started playing this beach game there. And as we were videoing it and recording our actions, we started to notice that our activity, our action there was kind of recontextualizing the environment itself, and the cars driving by started sounding like waves crashing. So we were kind of working with this idea of performance kind of enhancing or changing the environment.
And this led us to the creation of this video. It's called Gentrified Sundays. We found a site in Montrose area. It was falling apart, and we decided that this would be the perfect place to fry some objects. We went to Target, the dollar store, found some objects that are not necessarily important, and we decided to fry them in this location that's kind of falling apart. And then we plated them in a different location. So the action took place in a very different place of where it was consumed.
So we're using fairly like children's toys, something that's playful. We're using very light ways of dealing with more difficult conversation, I guess. Moving on to the piece we actually have here at Lawndale, Just Hanging. It's a series of videos that are collaged together. We're going around Houston, finding these areas and hanging from them. This action, while it's a little bit silly maybe or a little bit benign, the presence of somebody there taking up space in itself can be a bit somewhat violent, if in a certain way, like the idea that it's against the law to loiter, that kind of thing. So we're dealing with some of that issue there, but also there's kind of an aesthetic quality to it.
We were also interested in the contrast of the city of Houston being so hectic with the metro and the sounds of cars and pollution and construction, with a sort of more meditative movement, which is hanging from a place like a metronome and just swinging from side to side and not really caring what else is going on in the city. We're just there. And
all right, well, thank you for your time.
That's it.
Hello, everybody. How are y'all doing tonight? All right, I'm Steven. I'm going to talk about my work a little bit. All right, I think that art in itself is no longer about like landscapes and what's beautiful. I personally am inspired by what's ugly and odd, and also inspired by my life, just events happening in my life. So, for example, this is some of my close family, and a lot of them deal with addiction. I don't know if you've seen youth press lately. People smoke kush. Like my family is like completely addicted to it. This is a drawing of them. This is actually inspired by a night when I was at their house and ended up drinking a half bottle of vodka unintentionally. It's vodka. It's $10. I don't know if you guys ever know if you know what that is, but anyways, I drew this the day after when I called into work because I missed work. So that's the story on this piece here. This is one of my favorite people in the world, delivering really, really bad news to me. It's pretty bad. It's kind of messed up because I left it out in the rain. These are done in a notebook that's about 8 by 10, and I've been trying to make a collection so I can make like maybe a book or something out of it, like a reproducible book. That's why they're in 1 and 2 colors. But that's what this drawing is. Okay. I work in an industrial field. I'm surrounded by industry. I have a background in arts, but I pay my bills by working my ass off a lot. And so this is inspired by some of the machinery that I work with. So these gigantic fans, and I'm, like I said, I'm inspired by my life and what I see and what I'm surrounded by, and I just kind of use this and abstracted down to this kind of experimentation with form. I'm kind of addicted myself to using the X-Acto knife to cut and make stencils. This is a hand-cut stencil. This is the actual, let's see if I can put that directly. Anyways, my background is in graphic design. I love lettering, but I never know what to write. And I don't like writing what other people tell me to. So I recently forced myself to incorporate A through Z and 1 through 0, 1 and 0, all into this kind of abstract design and pattern. The mediums that I work in is drawing, printmaking, and painting. Those are kind of like the 3 that I stick to, and they all influence one another. This is completely hand done, hand drawn, in pencil, and then cut out. This is part of a series of 12 stencils that I did. They're all 11 by 17. I have this idea of making a reproducible art object, like a book or something like that, is playing. It's showing here, and this is only 8 of those, right? But there's a narrative that goes along, but it's like I don't have time to get into that. So those same stencils are incorporated into this painting. I've been trying to tie them into one another, the stencil and the painting. I just wanted to show you how they can connect. This is more abstract painting. The way that I work, I make an abstract painting, and then I try to bring the reality into it and layer it into an image of something that has a narrative. This one, the name's not important right now. This is one of the pieces that's in the show. This is called Bend, Texas. It's inspired by when I went camping in Bend. It's a beautiful place. You should all go. And anyways, this is the last one, which I don't have time to talk about, but I'll let you all think about it. Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. I'm so happy to be in the big show and really happy to be back in Houston. I'm really grateful to the staff and curators for all their work, and special thanks also to Dennis, Nance, Jenny Lynn Whites, and Scott Cartwright for helping me get this all together. I've been working in clay for 40 years, so I'm going to zip through a small survey. I discovered my love of clay in 1976 and never stopped. Every semester I took ceramics as a reward to myself until I finally realized, when I was cutting all my business classes to stay in the clay lab, that I had to major in art. I'm so grateful to Sarah Waters and Vern Funk for their guidance. In the upper left corner, you can see my BFA show. The tiny bases of unstable forms reflect the stability of graduating with an art degree. My preferred method is to work spontaneously to allow subconscious thoughts to surface. When life is in turmoil, it shows up in my work, as it does for so many. People who hurt me become immortalized as demons, while I depict myself as an innocent angel. Judy Ewan's gallery showed a lot of this work. This cathartic body of work lasted for about 10 years. Thank you, Judy. In 1984, I moved to Houston as a flight attendant and studied at University of Houston Clear Lake with Nick DeVries. Flying Dreams and the Demon in Me depicts my nightmares and hormonal stress. Clint Willauer and James Searles gave me my first awards for early cut forms, and then a grant from the Texas Commission on the Arts revealed my love of teaching, which led to my position at San Antonio College, where I was the head of ceramics for 20 years. During that time, I earned my MFA, studying with Steve Reynolds, Ken Little, and Fran Colpitt, who taught me the discipline required to write. It only took me 10 drafts to get this stack of notes. Everything in life affects my work, and William was the surprise of my life. Having him altered my attention to proportion and scale, among many other things. My first public commission in Brackenridge Park was awarded by the City of San Antonio, thanks to Felix Padron and Humberto Saldana. The project was completed in 2005 in collaboration with James Gray of Rialto Studios. Anaqua depicts a bird holding a seed in its beak, while Quercus represents a live oak leaf. And these pieces are about 2 to 3 inches thick. They're hollow forms, and they weigh between 200 and 300 pounds. In 2008, I became involved with a sculptor who showed me how to turn my work into fountains. Jesus and I shared a strong work ethic and love of art. I'm grateful for the time we had and for all the people he brought into my life. The sirens were shown at the Botanical Gardens curated by Bill Fitzgibbons. Out of the Depths from 2011 at the Nave Museum in Victoria was in response to the Deep Horizon oil spill and as a tribute to my dad, my grandfather, and the men who lost their lives in the explosion on the platform. My work illustrates how the subconscious permeates our thoughts and actions. As a single mom, my infant had to be in the studio with me, and it was a surprise that he watched me constantly. Kandinsky said, "Everything has a secret soul that is silent more often than it speaks." The realistic eye reminds me to behave myself and set a good example for my son. The white woven form on the right was here in Lawndale last year and is now in the Art Museum of South Texas, thanks to Rowena Young and Buddy Steves. Last summer, I retired from my full-time teaching position, moved to Houston, started teaching at Glassell, began my residency at the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. This window installation shows from left the newest work, Big Belly, King, I Spy Eros, which is going to the museum in Honolulu, and Gold Horns, which is in the permanent collection of the San Antonio Museum of Art, thanks to Steve Alpert. In October, my work will be shown in the sculpture exhibition sponsored by Rudolph Bloom Art Scan Gallery. And in 2017, we will have shows at the Nave Museum in Victoria and Redbud Gallery here in Houston. I'm so grateful to all of you who have given your friendship and support, and to the patrons, curators, architects, educators, artists, writers who have promoted my work. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, my name is Lim Chung, and the painting that I like to talk about tonight is actually one of the painting in my Dreamland series. Yeah, I kind of draft a dreamland of my, a mass blueprint of my dreamland. I have been working as an architect for my last 20 years, and I have been designing houses for many people for the last 20 years. And I think it's a time for me to design my own style of houses for my dreamland master plan. The first series, the first series of my master plan will be the Fisherman's Wharf. Okay, this series showing the coastal commercial centers on the wharf. The painting comes with an irregular black ink border. You can see the black ink border, and that denotes a window looking out to a new world. This window represents my eyes of soul and mind. I use irregular ink border to reflect vague dream imagery. All buildings are in different styles and shapes, and yet blended together in harmony. You can see they are all very different style of houses, but they blend it together. And the second series is called the Boardwalk. It's out of the sea. And all the shapes are mainly formed by lines to represent residential and business building on water. Different styles of buildings are set on a deck extending out toward the sea, depicting a relaxing and harmony lifestyles. Line strokes, forms, and wash can be seen all over the painting. And you can see in this, all my series are actually using the Chinese brush painting techniques. You can see a lot of dots, line strokes, forms, and wash in all my series. And this is a third series, which is a village, which I call the village. And this series, the beautiful scenery of terraces embroidered on the ridge and the Tulou, which is the name of that kind of style, is called the Tulou village, embedded in the terrace in Hokkien province of China, has actually triggered my design bug to construct a dreamland blueprint in my heart. The forms, the flowing of different weight, line strokes, and the wash brought the whole painting together. And this is also the series 3, the village. And the fourth series is called the Hill Country. And this section, okay, the Hill Country, you can see I use a lot of contour line on this section. And this section is built on the hillside. And this series tend to be more abstract than the previous series. Other than funny looking buildings grouped together, I use a lot of crazy architectural contour line strokes to represent the hillside. And the lines are continued in the sky to show the clouds, the moon, the sun, and even the trees, and so on. You can see there are a lot of lines and a lot of funny looking shapes. And the series 5 is called the Tree House. Okay, you can see in this blueprint, This is a tree house section where all the trees are by the river. There's a river close by. And living in a tree house, it's always my dream since childhood. In this series, I use line strokes and wash to construct funny shaped buildings or bird cages on big trees. You can see bird cages hiding behind the trees. And the bird cages indeed can represent a regular wooden or steel frame house structure. They may hide behind trees or sit on tree trunks. And the Series 6 and Series 7 are still in developing stage. Thank you.
So my name is Angela Corson. I'm from Colombia, and I always paint. I love paint. I studied a few years psychology in my country, but then when I moved here, I decided to be more in the art field. So what I paint? For many years, I paint beautiful flowers, still life, fruits, and many pretty things. People really like it, and they say, "Oh, it's beautiful." But I start to paint more things. I feel more deep in my soul. I paint from what I see in social life. I have a series, it's women and how they are affected by political things, so social life, family. Well, we are all affected about that, but I pick women because I'm one, and and I use myself sometimes as model. For me, this one is more how we don't want people to see ourselves. We just cover ourselves. It's a series of called mask. So that's another one. I feel is how we want people to see us. Just this little square we show when we have the best makeup, or we have it's the perfect smile, a perfect moment. So this is something I feel. I'm from Colombia, and my country is still the macho. I think everywhere, but it's like the macho. They cover what they want to let us see what they want, no everything else. And that's about social too. I feel it's more, we want to be part of social life. We have to be married, have family, have this perfect view. Sometimes society is the one who covers ourselves, but we still be beauty, no matter what cover us. I don't know, many interpretations people can have from that. One thing I love is fabric. I love to paint fabric, and I feel in nature. I found that one of my favorite subjects too is paint mushrooms. Like I said, this is another one. I love, I did many acrylics and oils, pastels, but I love acrylics. I think for me, I like to paint fast, so I do more acrylics. The ones I show are acrylics. This is our past. from here to whatever everybody wants to believe is. I found ceramics and I love it. It's another way to express myself, and I really love ceramic. So I hope I continue doing ceramics. This is another piece. It's called The Wall. And this is a quilt I made with ceramic. So this is a little bit of me. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Adrienne Duncan. My background is, I'm sorry, did I just press it? Okay. I graduated from the University of Houston last year. Oh, can you hear me? Okay. I graduated with an English literature degree, but I found myself in the past year, I can't stop painting. All of my series has been involved with women. It's my favorite subject matter. This series, however, has been focused on women in food. It's quite personal for me. I feel like there's a big connection of sensuality and comfort that comes with food and women. This is the piece that's in the big show. This one really reminds me of being in college, and it's a little bit of a self-portrait. It's just kind of like, I feel like sometimes a cup of ramen soup, sometimes just not interested in what I have to do. Yeah, I always try to pick subjects that are like fun and light and not too serious. I always try to be a little classy with my work or my figures. I really like more of a 40s or 50s like idea of femininity. To me, that's the most beautiful, and like I personally think that it's just nicer to look at. This is one of like my icons personally. I like how she kind of is maybe a little disgusted. I don't think she ever eats pizza. This is Dita Monteith. I love her. This is like a little bit of my journal work. Since the women in food pieces have kind of done some other pieces that are not maybe focused on food. The last few things I've been working on are the spaghetti girls. And so what I've come up with is like, have you ever been on like Craigslist and you're like looking at like what people are looking for? Because I have. And like, there are some people that are looking for some freaky stuff. And like, so like what I imagine is like a guy that's looking for like a girl who like exclusively wears like 40 to 50s like beatnik fashion or like pinup attire, and like goes to his house and like he makes the spaghetti though. Like he provides spaghetti and she like puts it in her dress and like she gets paid for it. But it's very light. Like I don't want to like be talking about anything too serious because I don't feel like I'm too serious about my work. But it's definitely something that's sensual and comforting, and I feel, yeah, like a little like overindulge yourself a little bit, or that's something that I definitely do with food. Yeah, so this is the last piece I've done. I also want to, sorry, at the last minute, I want to thank Lawndale for being really supportive and always encouraging and just being a great support system. Thank you.
Thank you for coming and taking time to view other artists' work. Today I'm not going to share the work, the piece that got me to the show. I'm going to share my solo show that I just had last month at the Joan Palmer's Art Gallery. And okay, I named this show The Everyday Life. The Everyday Life is a series of paintings that celebrate the small things and moments that are part of my life. I honor these moments in contemporary art as they should never be ignored and always appreciated as part of my personal history, present and future. Through the creative process, I'm always searching for the ideal combination of color and balance that creates visual impact. I use blocks of colors and lines in a variety of configurations to capture my moments. I really like to work also layers are very important for me. The moment, the instance, what it comes. And I also wanted to keep simple, like every day. I don't think it's nice when every piece of art has this great feeling and this thing in the back, but it's also what we have every day, what we eat, what we do, where we go, how we walk. For example, here's the soup, just as simple as having a soup. The sun in my eyes, just inspiring when you want to see something, there's the sun. This is a scarf I made on silk, especially to wear on my show because I wanted to wear something unique or being also as part of the show because the show is part of me, my life is very personal. So I did this piece named The Hug to wear it and happily sold it. The reader, this piece inspired my son when he was reading a book, and I really loved the way he used his hands to catch the book. That's what inspired me in that piece. Everything's acrylic, yes, I mentioned that. And this one, the last one, the copper bowl, a large piece. Well, all pieces has a story behind. I'm going to share just this one. This one's inspired when I was a little girl at my home. There was, my mom has this copper bowl, and at the entrance it was a granite floor, and I used to sit on that bowl and spin and spin and spin for hours or minutes. I don't remember, but I remember I was happy when I was doing it. It's just a happy memory, very simple, and I think I was you doing it every day. So today it came into a painting. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out tonight. I'm Diane Fraser. I am an abstract painter. I work in mixed media and oil. I paint on paper and collage as a studio strategy to resolve composition problems I encounter on bigger canvases. But I don't think of these as studies. They're more as complements to the larger finished works. I sometimes combine work and stitch them into little books, some of my collage pieces, so I'm going to pass this around. You can touch it. It's not a baby bird. And all my work is based on a grid, following the tradition of map making. I'm interested in how the effects of climate and man-made structures alter the environment. Music is a real important tool in my studio. For instance, John Luther Adams' album Become Ocean really led to a whole series that I named Become Ocean. The shifting planes and patterns created when land meets water are interesting to me, particularly when the effect of pollutants and climate alter the topography, which in turn restructures the intent of architecture and the infrastructure. I utilize symbols and design elements from iconography, cartography, geology, architecture, and cryptology. This is a natural consequence of my obsession with the grid. I paint from memory, personal experiences, sensory images, and feelings. My home studio has flooded 3 times in the past 15 years, so water is a recurring element. But I don't mean it to be a theme. It's my intention to express the poetry or the music, the emotion of the experiences more than the narrative. So the last Memorial Day flood, I was lucky enough to spend time in Galveston while my house was being demolitioned. And so I got really into images from Galveston, like the Pleasure Pier and cargo ships and beach houses on high stilts. To maintain the interest in productivity, I utilize Robert Motherwell's studio practice of repetition and variation. I think these next 4 slides will kind of give you that process. They're all from the Flag series. I rely on the background grid for structure, and I remodel compositional elements with a variety of textures, mark making, and color layers. I am a private person, so I rely on my work to speak for me, so it's really kind of miraculous for me that I'm even up here talking. I currently reside in my studio located in Bel Air, Texas, where all that is precious to me is stored 3 feet above the waterline. My work is currently on exhibit at Archway Gallery, Water to Wine on West Park, and Lawndale Art Center. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much for coming. I want to thank Lawndale and the curators for this great exhibition. Please forgive me, but I will read my words to make the best possible use of the little time I have. Instead of discussing my pieces shown, I will talk about my background and my process of creating art. I am an architect, work as a graphic designer, as a photographer, and as a videographer. I've worked with many different analog media in the past, and I'm thinking more and more in coming back to the analog world. Since 1992, I embraced the digital tools and found they are a very fast way to develop my ideas. I am very aware that as a tool which brings several solutions, one can fall into that trap. I fight not to fall in it. The cameras, the computer are extensions of me. I am not an extension of them. I keep using my hands, drawing, sketching every day. To put the first draft of an idea on paper, there is no faster tool than a pencil. And in that sense, I think the creation process has to be organic. My creative process is mostly by experimentation. I don't preconceive an idea with a philosophical construction to say to my work of art. It is the other way around. I try things and see if they have some depth and keep developing them to become a body of work, a project. I think seeing is one of the most powerful tools the human being has, particularly to create. And I mean seeing through your eyes, but from your soul. So my way of working is connecting with my surroundings and establishing a dialogue with it. Trying to find the beauty existing around us, trying to extract it from everywhere I go. I shoot every day no matter what. It can be a tree, the texture of a street, a crack on the wall, a light pole, the sky, a flooded street, a bridge. All To me, reality is a mirror in which I can see myself, and I mean, the French writer once said, "We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are." Intuition is an important aspect of my creative process. In a way, you have to see things like a kid sees things in a virginal state, like if you were seeing them for the first time. At the same time, I value mistakes because I think they are messages from our deeper self. So, when possible, I convert a mistake into an attribute. I give a lot of importance to the craft involved in the creative process. Émile Zola, the French writer, once said, "There are two men inside the artist, the poet and the craftsman. One is born a poet, one becomes a craftsman." So one can achieve strong artistic level in his work if these two elements are present, poetry and craft. And I don't mean poetry in literary terms, but in terms of the symbolic, elegance, the fine, the beautiful, the sensitive, the imaginative, and the original. Regarding my sources of research and inspiration, I would say they are many. Architecture, which I consider an art in itself, since a good architectural work is a sculpture in which you develop an activity. Then literature, poetry, cinema, nature, traveling, people, music, to name just some. Art is balsamic and at the same time it fulfills. I will finish this presentation and let some of the video roll until the end in silence with a quote of mine. "A true artist is a locksmith of the soul because it reopens what life closed by force."
Hi, my name is Wanda Harding. This painting is in the show, and it's unique for me in that it came to me, it's wholesale in a dream, including specifics like cadmium yellow light and holding the paintbrush with my left hand and really grinding it in big movements on the canvas. So it marked a turning point for me in bigger canvases, looser paintings, and a love of gestural painting. It's from a previous body of work, and toward the ends of that body of work, I began adding a few structural elements, geometric shapes, very subtly to some pieces, and at the same time rediscovered my love of Richard Diebenkorn and the Ocean Park series, and that influenced the next two projects I'm going to talk about tonight. This one is called Bray's Bayou. I had been mulling how did Diebenkorn look out his window and come out with these beautiful compositions for Ocean Park paintings. That was not working for me. And one day I was walking along Bray's Bayou and saw the bridge with the sunlight and shadows slanting under it and the posts, and it was like suddenly a magical kaleidoscope just came before my eyes, and everywhere I looked, the scene was flattened and simplified and cropped into these really appealing compositions. So I came home and painted from the photographs, which I don't usually use source material, and I discovered that it can really expand your palette. I don't think I would have come up with this color combination on my own. By the way, that last one did not make it in the big show. This one also is in the show. It's called Earth Angle, and it's a new project I'm working on, and all the rest of the slides will be from this project. This is on paper, and I'm really pushing the paper to go past being a support and actually being an element of the painting. I'm doing that by folding the paper and rubbing the paper and crumpling the paper and even ripping the paper. I'm also adding back some of the gestural elements. The process for these works is starting with a blank piece of watercolor paper and folding it and really putting some muscle into the folds. I want them to be an element of the painting. So I'm folding it both ways and then adding the gestural work, which is thinned paint, acrylic paint that I'm pouring or splattering, and then maybe tilting the paper to move the paint where I want it to go. And the third step is really where the decision making, the composition building comes in with planning where to make the shapes, what colors to use, what mediums to use to make what effects in the colored areas, what to accentuate, what to paint over. And the fourth step is layering until it's right. This one took a lot of layers. I started working with a more subtle palette. Here I'm exploring some thicker paint lines in the creases and leaving some of the creases unpainted and a little more negative space. And here I'm pushing the subtlety further in the palette and leaving more lines unpainted, just with the letting the creases make the line. And I want to push that a lot further in the future. And lastly, here's one that's both folded and crumpled. All of the pieces have a bit of a sculptural element to them because of the manipulations with the paper. And this one, once it crumples, it's even more so. And also it adds a bit of texture. And in this case, the paint itself was really leathery and had an interesting texture that I want to explore further also. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Lawndale.
Good evening, guys. How are you guys doing today? My name is Marcos. A little bit about me. I was born in Mexico. I floated across the tire on the Rio Grande when I was 8 years old, and I grew up here in Houston. So I went to school at the University of North Texas, and I've been here ever since then. A bit about my work. It's very abstract. The pieces that are downstairs are the 2 drywall sculptures or paintings. And this is kind of where it starts out. This is mostly what my sketchbook is filled out with. And for me, it's about challenging myself with line, with composition, trying to use as much and as little as I can at any given time. And I transfer that into the drywall pieces. When I graduated college, I had a big question about what can I do with art that is a way for me to talk about what I want to talk about with my work but still being fresh and new. And so I started finding different materials like drywall, asphalt, sand, tar, and I did that. I got those mostly from working in different fields, labor, construction, restaurant kitchens, doing things like that. And so this is how the image before and compared to, and this one is, that's kind of what I transferred onto the drywall before I started working on it. And so it's a very labor-intensive process. It's me using tools and sanders, saws to grind out these shapes. And for me, they're titled herencias, which is heritage, it's a birthright. And with that, I bring to mind, in art, I bring to mind the ideas of using different forms of art history, like the fact that the relief is something that you find from such a long way back, and also using these very expressionist, modernist forms that I like to play around that are what interests me. And they come to me mostly from what I see, from construction sites, power lines, asphalt lots. Everything that I see is a visual reference that I like to use in my work. And so um, also, when talking about heritage, I'm also talking about my own heritage as a first-generation immigrant, and also my parents. My dad's a construction worker. My mom is a housekeeper. I like to take pride in that and use glorify the material, glorify the labor that goes into it, into my work. You know, and it's also playing with the environment. They kind of reference topographical maps. They reference other natural forms, rock formations, sedimentary layers, things like that. And I like that idea of the plaster playing along the drywall plaster being something that comes from the earth and being used in a way that's not how it's originally made, and also not how it was man-made for. And it's kind of funny because, you know, you have, for example, this room here, there's so much infrastructure, a world built behind it, you know, the wood studs, the brick, everything that goes into this building, and in front of it, I get to put plastic drywall on it. And it's kind of funny. And so that is my work. As for me, I'll be having a solo show next weekend at the Galveston Arts Center, curated by Clint Weilauer. And also in October, I'll be published in New American Paintings, the October issue. So thank you.
First of all, I want to thank everyone at Lawndale for the opportunity to present my latest work. And my work is a statement about how fragile nature is and how everything is connected. I don't know how to do this, but okay. I have a studio outside of Houston, and I go for long walks with my dog and take photographs. And these photographs inform my work. And my drawings, sculptures, videos, they evolve with my imagination, and for me that's when the work begins to express and create my world. So here are a few of my, this is a large pastel drawing, and let's see. Some of these didn't photograph very well, but anyway, this is a sculpture. This is one of my latest works, and then I'm going to show you a 3-minute film video.
I want to thank Lawndale Art Center and specifically Dennis Nance and Stephanie Mitchell for making the big show a great experience, not just for the viewing public, but for the participating artists as well. Forward. This is my piece that's in the big show. It's called The Gentrification of Freedmanstown, and it's in the photography room. It's a painting. Yeah. This is the single most difficult piece of art that I've created to date, and I'm pretty passionate about the subject matter. This piece depicts a moment in time from an area about 2 blocks from where I lived for about 3 years in November of 2015. My goal in creating this piece was to render it as precisely as possible so that the viewer could see the changes that are actually taking place there. I felt like the juxtaposition of the buildings was commentary enough. As you can imagine, gentrification, especially in an area as historically significant as the first African American settlement in Houston, is a hotly debated topic. In creating this piece, I didn't really seek to bias the opinion of the viewer, only to provide information and allow a conversation to take place. This next piece is called Reflections of a Seductress. It's one of my personal favorites, and it's part of my realism series. I included it here. It's a watercolor on Bristol paper, and I included it here to represent my figurative work. Drawing and painting figures helps me to maintain a skill level that translates really well into my other creative endeavors. For Pandu is an acrylic on canvas paper. It is currently available. Pandu was one of 2 Malayan tigers that was housed at the Houston Zoo, and he was humanely euthanized in August of 2015, which is when I painted this, because of his failing health. I was just really struck by the majesty of this grand beast, and I just wanted to create a painting that commemorated him. The photograph that I used as inspiration for this piece can be seen on the Houston Zoo's website. Though I've painted throughout most of my life, I was actually an environmental scientist before I became a professional artist. This background in science informs every aspect of my work, and I've always been fascinated in minerals, rocks, gems, and everything really that comes from the earth. This piece is called Sunflower Study 1, and it represents a marriage of my realism work along with my mineralization work, which will be coming up. In this piece, I painted the background, and then I applied individual pieces of crushed or pulverized minerals, in this case including chrysocolla, coral, fuchsite, malachite, granite, opal, and even some 10-karat gold dust. The next 3 pieces, Tertian Harmony, Concordat Tertiana Mar, and Copper Earth and Green River, are examples of my mineralization work. I'm going to back up just so you can see. Just as in Sunflower Study 1, these pieces are first painted with acrylic, and then they're textured with minerals, semi-precious gems, and metals. Though I become intimately involved with the manipulation and placement of every piece of mineral and metal, the impressionist and abstract nature of these pieces challenges me to let go of the rigid adherence to process that's required when I'm creating those realism pieces. In their creation, I'm caused to leave my comfort zone and accept for what is good what comes from that liberation. I'm going to kind of whip through here, fantasize because I'm down to a minute. As artists, we're always seeking new ways to express ourselves. The next 2 pieces show some of my newest explorations into how science can assist me in speaking to my viewer. This piece is part of a combustion series. Through trial and error, I've developed a proprietary concoction that allows me to incorporate minerals and metal dust into a waxy granular medium that I place over top of the dry paint, and then I light it on fire with a blowtorch. It bubbles and smokes and eventually cools, much like lava, and then it's permanently adhered to the substrate. And as you may be able to see in this picture, the combusted areas stay glossy even when they're totally dry. This group was the first in my combustion series, and it's composed simply of acrylic painted background and then granite dust with combustion medium over the top. I just want to thank you all for your time. Please visit and like my page on Facebook at Artist Patty Lennon Fine Art Gallery. I have 3 shows coming up in September, and I'd like to see everybody there. If you'd like to purchase a piece or have a commission piece, contact me at artistpattylennon@gmail.com. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Lulu, and this is my partner Lynn, and we are the art duo Lulu Lynn. So we worked together from the initial concept sketch all the way through to the final finished piece, and we work really interchangeably. People ask us, how it works usually, but it's pretty fluid. We have very similar aesthetics, so one of us just starts the painting and the other one just kind of paints right on top of the other. The following paintings are from our Fluid Dynamics series, inspired by the physical properties of liquids, and they're what we've been working on since the last time we exhibited at the big show. So this is our depth diptych. It's inspired by oceanography maps, and we wanted to transform something that's usually very utilitarian into something that's fun and whimsical by infusing bright colors and a kind of Dr. Seuss aesthetic. This is from our undercurrent diptych. It depicts something that, like humans, bodies of water can be calm on the surface and have very turbulent activity down below.
So this next one is our tide diptych, and it's initially inspired by photos of women with vitiligo skin patterns. And we were very interested in all the different patterns that you could see. It's kind of like looking at a photo of clouds and trying to pick out what the shapes were that you saw. And so on a lot of these photos, I kind of felt like I was seeing a shoreline or like a beach, like an ocean line, something like that. And so we created this set of paintings with the idea of using like similar colors and shapes and assembling them differently, so you kind of get a different image on each side, although the parts are very similar. It's kind of like a puzzle that can be rearranged to like show something different. And then the next one, this one is called a plume. We were kind of looking at the idea of the similarities between how fluid dynamics work and how aerodynamics work, and how like water is basically just a really dense air, essentially. And so in this one, we tried to use the two kind of interchangeably by placing this like streak of what could be like either blue ink falling into water or blue smoke rising into air. And so with that idea, we try to form it into the shape of her lungs to kind of take the place of like the air. And then this last one we have is one of our latest. It's called Vessel. And like the plume painting, it kind of deals with like what's on the inside versus what's on the outside. When you pour like a liquid into like a container or something, it always takes whatever shape the container is in. So we were kind of looking at that idea is when you come into this world, you're born, into a certain family, in a certain country, things like that, and how your environment could shape you. But in this picture, she's also the vessel containing the liquid. And so she is also having an effect on the shape of whatever's inside her, but also on the world on the outside. So just kind of like our thoughts and ideas between these paintings. But for most of our paintings, they're very like up to be interpreted by the viewer. So I think that we've talked to a lot of viewers and they see things that are very different from what we initially thought, but are just as valid, really. In addition to our paintings, we're also working on Houston's first art cafe, and that will open hopefully in September. So right now we're working on the renovations and stuff like that. It's called Honey Art Cafe. You guys should look us up on social media. It's on the corner of Shepherd and Richmond, and you guys can drive by and see the big sign we painted outside. All right, thank you guys so much, and thanks for having us.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rajab Sayed. I am a graduate painter at the University of Houston, and I paint from my life. I think my favorite paintings or my favorite forms of art are art that is realistic in the sense that it comes from an honest place, that it comes from someone's experience. And my favorite writers are Augustine Burroughs or even David Sedaris, you know, people who I think take moments from their life and make it or represent it as honest as they can. And so the paintings you'll see are part of what is going to be my thesis work, my master's thesis work at the University of Houston, which is going to be early next year. So the body of work started with a self-portrait. This is called Waiting for You, Waiting for Me. And I think what I can achieve with painting is to express a sense of quiet that I feel is so rare in the world because everything is so fast. And even how we, I think, digest images, it's so fast. And I think painting allows for a kind of quiet that is loud and that is powerful and that is very rare. This is called Paradise Road. And the reference, so I paint from photographs and I constantly document my life in video and photography, and then I use them as raw materials for painting. And Paradise Road was actually my first time in Vegas, and my boyfriend had taken me. It was our 4th date at the time. And when we got off the airport, he said, "I'm gonna take you to Paradise." And I thought, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I need to get out of here. You're obviously crazy. And so we left McCarran Airport like on foot, and that's the first intersection that you hit on foot. And I thought that was hilarious. And I took a photo from behind him trying to get the sign. And at that precise moment, the exposure had burst from the street lamp, and it turned into this kind of divine moment, which I thought was, again, hilarious. And then in the background, you can see kind of billboards for pinups. So I thought Paradise Road was, at least in this world, super hilarious. And I decided to paint that. This is called Just Kids, and it's from a beach party. And I was really fascinated with the limitations of what painting can represent in terms of perspective, in terms of cinematic qualities, in terms of drama. And this was one of those pieces. So this piece is called Sex on the Beach. And for some of you who can clearly point out where the X's are, you will know why I chose to paint those Seki paintings, but, those Seki cans. But I thought that was, again, super funny that it just happened to be that way, and also talks about an experience. But this is called The Number and the Place, and I was really toying with the idea of how to paint people with not actually having to paint people. And as you'll see in the paintings that follow this, I'm really fascinated by windows because I think windows occupy this fascinating place between indoor and outdoor, and I think they're super romantic. This is called Bright Lights, Pretty Baby, and it's from a recent experience that I had in New York, but I really wanted to paint this. This is the piece that's in the show. It's called Daydreamer. And again, the window and the reflection and the quiet. This is called A Boy of Summer. And these paintings are huge, like they're bigger than what they are on the wall. This is called I Saw Sparks. There's a really funny story about this, but I'm running out of time. And this is called Goodbye Brooklyn. It's from a breakup that I had. But yeah, Thank you so much, Lawndale, for having me. And if you guys are interested to talk about the stories that inspire the paintings, I'm right here. Have a great day.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody at Lawndale, as well as the curators, for putting this show together and for giving me and everybody else here the opportunity to talk about our work. I still can't quite believe I'm here. Does anybody out there remember either experienced or read in the history books about the Cuban Missile Crisis? Well, anyway, for those of you that don't remember or didn't pay attention in history class, what happened was Russia tried to install nuclear missile facilities in Cuba. We caught them red-handed at it and demanded they remove the missiles. Things got really, really tense in the fall of 1962. A lot of people, including 6-year-old me, thought World War III was imminent. Fortunately for us and the planet, the Russians backed down. That experience permanently affected my worldview. I had seen the pictures of Nagasaki and Hiroshima in the encyclopedia. I knew that the adults were lying to themselves and to us, pretending that survival was likely. I guess you could say it was the end of my innocence. As an adult, I shoved those fears to the back of my mind and went on living my life. But over recent years, as I've watched the US and Russia again kind of devolve into a Cold War relationship, all that stuff started coming back to mind, and I felt like I needed to paint about it. These are the two pieces that are in the show. Both are acrylic on canvas, measuring nearly 4 feet across. I combine imagery from a lot of different sources. The 4 red and silver shapes that you see in the corner of the right-hand painting came from a US government photo of a particular type of missile known as B-61. The kind of devilish mask shape that you see in both of these, in several of the other paintings, in here and in here, is something that actually derived from a process of abstraction and alteration and recombination that I started applying to my figurative watercolors several years ago. I photograph the watercolors, load the images into Photoshop, and basically start cutting, pasting, manipulating, doing all kinds of things to them until they become what I call digital collages. Here is the digital ancestor of the big painting you just saw. The missile shape came from a photograph of a Russian missile, and I just kept refining and simplifying until there was nothing left but the outline. Here's another digital collage, and yet, oops, too soon. Back up. Here's one, and here's another. I have a number of these digital collages available as inkjet prints. They're limited to an edition of 3, and they're all very small. They're all 7 inches by 7 inches, 12 by 12 with the frame. And that was one of the things that started bugging me about them. They're tiny and they're complicated, and several of them just hollered, "I want to be much larger. Get me out of this frame." And and the problem was at first, well, I couldn't do them big digitally because in a lot of cases I had used old, degraded, really funky public domain photographs. And enlarging them digitally would have been they would not have been a good thing. So I picked up my paintbrush again after a hiatus of many years and started doing acrylics on canvas. This guy is, again, almost 4 by 4 feet. And something happened in the process while I was trying to just adjust the formal qualities of the painting. The bullet shapes started looking like lipsticks. I don't always know exactly why I make an image in a certain way. I sometimes have to interpret my paintings the same way I would a dream. And in this case, I suspect the meaning of this one has something to do with the fact that I feel women can be just as vicious as men. After all, there are female terrorists and female gang leaders. Whoops, that's not supposed to be here. Wait a minute. Yeah. The last line in the artist statement that I wrote to go with this series talks about loss of innocence. And shortly after writing that, I came up with the idea of using a doll to represent childhood innocence. I bought a couple of secondhand Raggedy Anns off of eBay, started photographing them and combining them with images of nuclear destruction. This was the first painting in that series, and it's about 2 feet by 2 feet. A kind of a strange thing happened while I was working on the Raggedy Ann images. The doll stopped being an innocent victim and took on a really creepy, evil aspect. Unfortunately, I forgot that slide, so you'll have to just either imagine it or come to my studio and I'll get it out and show it to you. Things actually get even worse with the next piece in the series. This one is called Playing with Fire, and it started with a toy monkey who's really pretty darn creepy. I only got a little bit more creepy without the addition to the mushroom cloud. But he's a symbol for all that's unevolved in his fellow apes. Us humans, our technology has grown so powerful that we can destroy the world in 100 different ways, and somehow we haven't caught up with that spiritually, morally, or philosophically. We are still apes playing with fire.
Hello, I'm Katya Vasilyeva, and okay, so I think what affected me positively was watching a lot of disturbing movies as a kid with my parents, and that made me like a lot of dark things. And I don't like to use color in my drawings, so I stick to black and white. And I usually work with a micron 0.005 ink pen. So all of the artworks you'll see are down like that. So this is where it all started about 5 years ago. I decided to just start with shapes and see what they'll take me. And I enjoyed working with cross-hatching, and I stuck with it. This one was subconsciously inspired by Metropolis, the lady in it. This one, I didn't really intend for it to have a lot of meaning. I just drew the, I guess, the characters that came to my mind. So it's all up to interpretation. Okay. This one, I'm inspired a lot by sci-fi and space and mysterious things. So this artwork could be explained as, in the future, when people explore space a lot, they'll start leaving monuments behind on planets that they are not gonna go back to, just cause. This one, I made this after I read Ray Bradbury's Kaleidoscope, and it has squares that have segments of human skull in them, kind of like a memento mori, and the darker squares have sort of spaceman flying away from the broken ship, about to face their death. This one has a similar theme. To me, I think the worst type of death would be death in space, when nobody will ever find you and you're all alone, and you're kind of being consumed by darkness. So this is one of the recent works I've made. And last but not least, this is a human skull kind of stitched together to create this landscape, so to say. I really like the nuances and tiny details of human skull, and some people might not think that it's anything to do with human anatomy, that maybe it's something to do with land or earth, and that's why I enjoy creating stuff like this. So short, but thank you very much.